most people are familiar with the phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yes, yes.
Well, I can explain that a little bit. I have never had a racehorse who's fresh off a race. I go ahead and offer them water and they don't drink. If I go ahead and get them cooled out first, then I have that issue.
Welcome to another special equine edition of the Pet Food Science Podcast, where we explore science and strategies in equine nutrition. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Rankovich, and today we're joined by Dr. Brian Nielsen to discuss the very important topic of hydration and electrolytes in our horses. Dr. Nielsen is a professor of equine exercise physiology at Michigan State University, where he holds a teaching and research appointment. He completed his undergrad degree in animal science at the University of Wisconsin-River Falls before earning both his master's and PhD from Texas A&M University. With over 90 peer-reviewed publications and more than 70 invited international talks, Dr. Nielsen is a recognized leader in equine research, particularly in equine exercise physiology and nutrition. He has served as the president of the Equine Science Society and contributed to the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Nutrient Requirements of Horses. His work has been recognized with multiple awards for both research and teaching, and he has secured over $3 million in research funding. And a very fun fact, or at least I thought it was fun, was that he has been the advisor for the MSU Rodeo Club for over 27 years, which is fantastic. So Dr. Nielsen, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I appreciate being invited to come here today and talk with folks, and especially the topic we're going to cover is something that we can manage very easily. And I figured that would be something that we can have some fun with today. So
absolutely. I think there's always a lot of questions about hydration, especially as people start to think about, the warmer weather and their show season. And so I think it's a very good, timely topic as well. But before we get too excited and, dive deep into it, would you mind perhaps talking a bit more about yourself and specifically what led you down the path where you are today and what got you interested in equine exercise physiology?
Wow, that's a great question. I'll start right at the beginning, which is we had horses until I was about 4 or 5, and then my dad sold them because he thought they were dangerous and bought us motorcycles. So that tells you the intelligence of my family. Didn't want anything to do with horses after that because they were big, scary. I figured you go riding them, cross a field, they step in a gopher hole, break a leg, you all die. However, 4 years of high school working at a veterinary clinic, I was getting a little tired of that. Had the opportunity to begin a job as a trail guide on horseback. I thought that sounded kind of fun. Had to ask my friends how you stop them, how you steer them, because I really knew nothing about horses. And that was the day before I graduated high school. I did not know my life would change forever at that moment. But I started at college as a chemistry major. Say it with me. Nerd. I have a lot of good friends that are chemists, but yeah. Anyway, I had started this love of horses, this passion for it. Did an internship in Vermont working on a Morgan horse farm, got riding a little bit of dressage. Left there to get back to college because I joined the rodeo club, and so had to get back for a bareback clinic because riding bucking horses, dressage horses, it's all the same. Hopefully it's not actually, but it's all good. And then as a sophomore, I had switched to an animal science major, and again, no looking back. Decided to go to grad school for this stuff, went to Texas A&M, and actually prior to that, in undergrad, I was riding a lot of reining horses. I thought that was going to be my career. And one night, my horse professor rode up to me in the arena, said, "Brian, how much do you weigh?" I told him, he said, "Okay, this summer you're going to be breaking and galloping thoroughbred racehorses." I'm like, all righty, sure. I knew nothing about them, but racing has been my passion ever since. Got to do a lot of research with that when I was down at Texas A&M. Still heavily involved in the racehorse world. I'm actually chair of the Michigan Horse Racing Advisory Commission. Would love to be racing horses here in Michigan. That's not working out well right now because we don't race quarter horses or thoroughbreds here anymore. And that actually will kind of segue into why I thought this topic was kind of important because I actually had to send a horse out to another trainer in a different state to run for me. And I've always been, I've always thought the whole electrolyte and water, not water conversations were fascinating because there are so many misconceptions out there. And my life has been dedicated to probably two main things. One is helping horses. I want to make their lives better. I want to keep them sound. We do a lot of research trying to get bone and joint health figured out. But any way we can make their lives better to improve their welfare, that's critical. And then the other thing is trying to help out horse owners. And a lot of that is helping them to avoid wasting money. Because in the horse industry, we do a lot of that.
It's easy. Yeah, it's easy.
Oh my gosh, yes. I always tell my students, it's not how much you make in the horse industry, it's how much you don't spend. I think as we converse about this today, you'll understand exactly why I kind of feel this was an important topic.
Yeah, perfect. And so I think that sets the stage perfectly. And I think before we get diving too deep, can you maybe share a little bit into why is hydration such a critical topic when we talk about horses and especially our performance horses? Why does it even matter?
Sure. We always talk about water being the most important nutrient. And in fact, even just in class yesterday, I was explaining to my students, like as a human, you can go on a hunger strike and probably live, usually it's about 40 days. By the way, if I go 4 hours, sometimes I consider that to be a hunger strike. But water by contrast, and of course it depends on environmental conditions, but maybe a week or so before you wave goodbye. So, of all of our nutrients, it is the most important. And horse people tend to make some big mistakes on that. I remember as a exercise rider when I got started in the whole racing thing back in 1989, the belief was, man, you never gave water to a hot horse. You would walk them out, cool them out ahead of time. And the logic was you wanted to avoid problems with like colic or laminitis and things like that. I'm here to tell you that's a big mistake. And part of what has fascinated me about this is I'm also a runner myself, and I'm also a guy. And I think a lot of the people listening may be able to agree with us. Guys are dumb. Fortunately, I teach mainly to female students. I usually have a guy or two, and I have to apologize because I'm throwing them under the bus and letting people know that, yeah, we are dumb. And I'll explain where this comes into play. We have an outdoor track here at Michigan State University. Myself and some of my running partners, in the summer, we do a hard workout. They don't have drinking fountains there. Again, I'm a guy, so what did I not bring with me? Water. A gal would do that. A gal would bring a water bottle, but us guys, we wouldn't do it. We run back to our building. By that point, we're cooled out. And the thing is when you're hot, you have this drive to drink because you're thirsty. After you've cooled out, that disappears. And so I would often find myself, and it took me a while to figure it out because I'm a guy and not the smartest, that, if I didn't drink after I finished running, the first time it happened, it actually scared me. I got back to my office where I am right now, sitting down at the desk and planning to get some work done. And all of a sudden, I am actually having some vision loss. I'm having trouble seeing the computer screen because things are kind of blurry. I'll admit it scared me. We had a secretary at that time. This was many years ago. And I was like, Tina, I'm just letting you know what's happening in case something really bad. I was thinking I was having a stroke. After about a half hour of just sitting here, 45 minutes, I could start to get the vision back. Zooming ahead, what I realized is I was dehydrated, extreme, because I love running hard. I love it when it's hot out. You work up a great sweat. And once I figured that out and would actually start drinking after I exercised, and especially if I had a hard workout to actually drink at that point, that problem has disappeared. It's really sad that I needed to figure this all out on my own because most intelligent people would have known it. I want to go back and relate it to the horse. Oftentimes, when you go ahead and you do not water your horse when it is hot, by the time you get them cooled out, they've lost this drive to drink. And so to to fill the listeners in on this, in the racing world, after you win a race, you go back to the test barn, and they need to collect urine and they need to collect blood. Now, most people are familiar with the phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yes.
Well, I can explain that a little bit. I have never had a racehorse who's fresh off a race. I go ahead and offer them water and they don't drink. If I go ahead and get them cooled out first, then I have that issue. And so I go to the test barn with a horse. I love going to the test barn because usually it means you've had success. But do I really want to spend hours there? No. But if I let them start drinking right away, they have to go potty. It makes sense. And by contrast, if you don't let them cool or drink after they've run hard, fast, sweat a lot, they are really dehydrated, in which case they really don't have to urinate. So oftentimes I'll get to the test barn and leave there before people who've had horses in the races prior to me, just because they let their horse cool out before offering a drink of water. Now, I will time out for a second. Even though there is not good evidence that letting a horse drink up immediately all at once right after a hard bout of exercise causes problems, I'm still going to be cautious. And so what I will do is I'll let them drink. And I always tell my students, I start to count to 10 while they're drinking. Normally I panic when I get to about to 5. I pull their head up. We walk just a little bit. And I seriously mean just a little bit, like 5-10 seconds. I can let them do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm going to panic and do it. Pull them up. So what I end up doing is within a very short period of time, like a couple of minutes, they've been able to drink all the water they want. Now, the reason I play it safe is because, once again, I'm a guy and I'm stupid. I haven't done it in many years now, but been really hot after a hard workout, and you take a big slug of water and all of a sudden it's like, oh, my gut hurts. I colicked myself. And so if I can colic myself, I don't want to put a horse at that risk. So more recently, now it's been many years, you take a drink, you let your friend take a drink, you take a drink, you let your friend take a drink. Same way you would do it with a horse, and you will never have any issues. The point is, drinking while they're hot encourages them to drink. It helps avoid that chronic dehydration. I don't know if horses get headaches. I don't know if horses lose their vision when they've been dehydrated like that, but it's such a simple little thing to do. It's free. Why not do it and get your horse cooled out that much faster? So again, water your hot horse, but be smart about it. Let them drink, hold their head up, walk them for 5-10 seconds, let them do it again, walk them 5-10 seconds, let them do it again. And pretty soon you can let them drink all the way up. A lot of endurance horses, if not all the endurance horses, during an endurance ride when they're competing 50 to 100 miles, they'll just let them drink all they want right from the start. And I don't know of any issues that have ever arisen from that. I would say there's probably some differences in that type of exercise, long and, not super fast versus one that's gone out there and is working full speed, 1.25 miles or something like that. So just play it a little safe and you'll be in great shape.
Absolutely. And I think that sort of leads me into my next question. So in those instances, you've got a horse that's been working a lot, it's been sweating a lot. Is just providing them with water enough?
Okay, so I would say probably under most circumstances, yes. But this brings us up to the whole electrolyte conversation. And here's where people make mistakes on a number of levels. One, oftentimes people, they want to go ahead and replace the electrolytes. And by the way, when we're talking electrolytes, to put it into very common terminology, the 3 main ones we worry about are sodium, chloride, and potassium. So they may mix in an electrolyte mix in their water, or they may opt to give them, a paste with.
I love how you have that on your desk.
By the way, I also have ramen noodles. If you want electrolytes, ramen noodles, just saying. So I've come prepared for us today.
I love that.
So the deal is let's talk about adding it to the water. We've done research here at Michigan State University. I've been very privileged ever since I've arrived at Michigan State in 1996. I've become friends with Dr. Hal Schott over in the vet school. We've done a number of research projects looking at hydration, looking at electrolytes, and all of these things. So this is all research backed. If you go ahead and provide a saline solution, meaning has salt in it, and provide it in that initial drinking bout, when they're really hot and they are allowed to drink right away, that can actually encourage them to drink more water later. Won't happen right now because normally what the horse is limited is by the capacity of their stomach. So if they drink the water, the stomach fills up, they're done. If you're just doing straight water as opposed to salt water, going on down the road a little bit, a couple hours later, they don't drink as much water. Think about it. You eat French fries with a lot of salt on or something like that. Going back to your husband, he's going to want to drink some more beer because he's more thirsty later on. And if you want to go ahead and have that horse drink more water, providing that electrolyte solution in the water that they're drinking right away can encourage that. Now, don't over extrapolate from this. If you provide that electrolyte mix later, after they've cooled out a bit, you run the risk of them actually drinking less. And I'll do a little comparison. So normally Gatorade, if I was sitting here today, and somebody offered me some Gatorade, it doesn't really have all that much appeal. By the way, Gatorade actually has very little salt in there, very little electrolytes compared to what you lose. I could get sidetracked. You and I could be visiting for hours today, but I'll try to keep it.
So don't give Gatorade to your horses
there's no real need. There's just not that much electrolytes in there, but it tastes good. And especially after I've worked out, I might drink more Gatorade just because it tastes good. It has a little sugar in there and all that stuff. But later on, I might just opt for straight water. I have all my visuals. Isn't this fun? This has actually been sitting on my desk for a few weeks. So I'm glad there's
I should take some notes from you. I need to start putting things like little props on my desk to pull out when I have guests. You're making me look unprepared today.
Makes it more entertaining, we'll pretend. So, again, once a horse is cooled out, if all you provide them is water with an electrolyte mix in it, you might be discouraging them from drinking. If a person wants to keep a bucket of electrolyte water mix in the stall with their horse, if the horse is in a stall, I also encourage them to have just a bucket of straight water. What you do not want to do is get your horse dehydrated because you put something in the water that they don't like, and as a result, they're going to drink less of it. So that's kind of the trick on that. But now let's get into the real fun. So these electrolyte mixes, the pace that you can give. Folks, first of all, I want to talk about what it is you're providing, what you need to provide. Sodium, chloride, potassium. If you combine sodium and chloride, you have this fancy thing that we call salt. Salt is really, really, really cheap. As opposed to some commercial product that you buy for your horse. Those commercial products, the one advantage they have to them is there is usually some flavoring that's involved. But I encourage you, actually, we're going to check you out. Have you ever tasted some of those horse electrolyte mixes?
I have. I find they usually smell better than they taste. I think I've had the apple one, and I think the one that I've had most recently had like some fenugreek flavoring in it.
Well, folks, we did not rehearse that, but that was the answer I wanted. They smell great.
Oh my gosh, yeah. They're deceiving.
That's why we get suckered into tasting them, because I was like, oh, that smells really good. And it's like, that's just salty. So they have that little flavoring in there, which might encourage a little bit more consumption. Effectively, I would say that's probably more for the humans because we think it's this big magical thing. What we're doing is providing salt. The other part to it is potassium. Oh, and by the way, a great way to provide salt to your horse? Well, put a salt block in their stall. And I hear people talking about, okay, salt block versus loose salt. I don't care. I don't think the horse cares. People will say, well, the horse's tongue is so smooth that it's hard for him to lick the salt. Again, I had a discussion with my students yesterday, and one of them said, you know what? Hay is a lot more rough.
That's true. Yeah.
I was like, Caitlin, did you eat hay? She said, no, but think about it. It's like, that's going to be a lot more rough than licking a salt block. I thought it was a great analogy. I told her I would be using that analogy today.
Send it to Caitlin. We'll have to have her on too.
Absolutely. The thing is, a horse might consume more loose salt than it might a salt block because it's easier to consume. Does it need that extra? Probably not. But I don't care which form you provide it in. Other than, let's talk a little bit about the various salt mixes. We have our plain white salt. You have the trace mineralized salt blocks, the red ones. I live in Michigan. We're a selenium deficient state. I actually buy and I always have trouble pronouncing this. I have to seleniumized. I don't know if I really got it right. The yellow ones, kind of greenish.
Yeah, we have this here in Ontario too for the exact same reasons. Yeah.
And the thing is, it helps to ensure, especially if you're not feeding a commercial grain, because commercial grains, especially if you're buying them in a selenium deficient area, they're going to have selenium added in there. The feed companies know what is needed in a given area, and they will have you covered. But if you're not, these salt blocks are so cheap relative to everything we buy for our horses. Just get, again, if you're in a selenium deficient area, get the seleniumized one. That salt block, and I don't know how much they weigh, 40, 50 pounds. I'm making that number up, but something like that.
Different sizes.
Is going to be about the same price or maybe even cheaper than one of your typical single tubes of these electrolyte things. So if you have your horse have access to a salt block, you probably don't need to be providing them extra salt. But then the next question is the potassium. As long as a horse is eating forage, and most horses eat forage, hay or whatever, the odds are you are greatly exceeding the potassium requirements for the horse. Because hays typically have huge amounts of potassium, way more than the horse would need, other than in extreme circumstances. Horses that are sweating a lot because they're an endurance horse, or, a horse that's training for hours per day, logging many miles in really hot temperatures. But most of the time, horses get all they need from their diet, as well as if you have a salt block available. I will throw out another thing for consideration. These Himalayan salt blocks have gained a lot of press and popularity over the years. I have a very dear friend who's an equine nutritionist in Australia, and she informed me she was encountering a lot of horses that were developing goiters down there that were on these Himalayan salt blocks. And people do it because it's natural. And
it looks pretty, it has the rope, and it's pink.
Yeah, and they're not iodized. As opposed to the unnatural ones, which have iodine added to them because we know we need iodine in our diet. And so these people who are trying to do the right thing and give this natural thing to their horse are actually causing their horses health issues. So I'm a big fan of providing iodized salt to the horse as opposed to going to what's natural. I was doing some consulting on a thoroughbred farm out in New York, and they had the Himalayan salt blocks as opposed to regular ones. And I said, not an urgent thing that you do, but you might want to switch back to, the not the type that's being marketed heavily, like, oh, this is going to provide all this wonderful stuff for your horse that it really doesn't need. The next time that I was out there, I noticed that they had put regular salt blocks in, but had left the Himalayan salt blocks in there, and the horses really hadn't touched the regular salt blocks. Because apparently the Himalayan salt blocks do taste good or better. So don't be fooled by that. Just because your horse is eating it, because it tastes good, might not actually be the best thing for your horse. So I have so many things I want to cover, but I want to go back to, and these little magical paste things. There is one, last time I was at one of these stores that sells this stuff, it was still being marketed. I had been asked to write a letter or a article on electrolytes for the publication Thoroughbred Times. This was many years ago. I don't recall exactly how long ago, but 15 years ago maybe. And I had mentioned one of these electrolyte paste things that you can buy at your regular place where all you buy your horse goodies. I did not identify it by name, but I mentioned what the nutrient profile was of it. It contained 0.625 grams of sodium chloride. I don't recall much of a potassium complex in it.
You remember the exact sodium chloride, like considered this that many years ago. That's great.
Yeah. Well, what's fun about it is after that came out, the editor of that publication called me. I was actually in the Detroit airport coming or going from some meeting when I got his phone call. And he's like, "Hey, Brian, I had a call from a guy." And I was like, uh-oh. And it turned out it was the manufacturer of this product. And I'm like, he goes, "I didn't give him your number, but would you call him back?" And I was thinking, oh, this is going to not be fun. Called the guy back. And actually, he was great. And he was like, because I had used those values to compare them to what the requirements of the horse was. And he's like, "So how do you know what the requirements of a horse are?" And I said, "Well, the horse NRC." And he had no clue what that was. And I'm like, "Okay, so you make something to replace nutrients, but you don't know how much."
Yeah.
I didn't say that. But then he asked, "Can I hire you like as a consultant?" I'm like, "I'm at a university. This is what we do. We help people. We share information. Anytime you have questions, just holler." And I thought, good. We took one useless product off the market, or at least he was going to change it. All these years later, it's still there. But here's what
That's
I want.
Where I thought that story was going.
Yeah, no. And here's what I want to do. And I don't. Okay, I'm going to turn to my desk. Let's see what I might have in here. I don't think, if I went to my truck, I might have it in here. But like I mentioned, I was in the Detroit airport. I decided I'm going to go over to a McDonald's. And you know those little salt packets that you get free with your French fries? Actually, you probably don't even need to buy fries to grab some. Those contain 0.7 grams of sodium chloride. This electrolyte paste contained 0.625 grams. That packet of salt that you get free with your fries provides more salt than this thing that last time I checked was $7.99 for a tube. So my deal is the guy was ignorant, which you shouldn't be if you're selling stuff, but he was ignorant when he called me. And now I have to think he's just unethical because I told him the truth and he's still selling it. And I'm going to use the word scamming. He's scamming the horse industry. And that happens. And so there are some of these pastes that actually have reasonable amounts of, when I say reasonable, not huge, but like this one here, got to put on the glasses, old age. This one contains 12 grams. So realistically, it contains more than 0.625 grams. But if you think how little 12 grams is, and for anybody who's not up on grams, a nickel weighs about 5 grams. So, like 2.5 nickels weight worth of salt. Folks, you can do that so much cheaper. This one has $8.99 written on it. There is no good reason to spend this much money on stuff that is... Salt is not free, but it's about as close to free as anything we give our horses, other than water. And that's why I love this topic. It's like water is free unless you have to buy it in a little bottle. Salt is next to free. And so let's stop wasting our money. Now, let's talk again as to piss me off. So I sent this horse off to another trainer, good guy, good friend. Anyway. And when I got my first vet bill, because trust me, if you send a horse to a racehorse trainer, there's vet bills. And some of it makes sense, like for Lasix, and we could have a topic on discussion on that if you want.
But
what irritated me is I was charged $60 for electrolytes. This was for a racing quarter horse, which was going to be running 300 yards in Minnesota. Trust me, $60 for salt. And probably not that much salt. And I can buy a lot of salt for yeah. And I'm thinking that horse, by the time the race is completed, probably hasn't even really started sweating yet.
Right.
But this is what happens. And I'm not sure who's to blame, because it was like, okay, this was a one and done thing, brought the horse back. We're not using that vet anymore. Won't be sending a horse to that trainer. If I do, it won't happen. But if I did, I would talk to the trainer, because I don't know if it was the trainer saying, oh, this horse needs electrolytes, or if it was the vet saying, you know what? Yeah, this is what we always do. But that's another scam. There is zero reason to do that. So as I've gotten older, I am that get off my yard old man from the standpoint of like, nope, don't scam people.
Yeah. So I guess, sort of to take away from that, so are there any instances where you kind of recommend a commercial electrolyte over salt, or for almost all horses, just providing them with sufficient salt is enough to meet those demands?
Rarely would I recommend any other type of thing besides salt. And if you want to do it, and maybe there is, if you're just not comfortable, I get it. A lot of people aren't comfortable on things and they want to go with something trusted. Some of this stuff shouldn't be trusted.
It's just tradition, right? You've done it a certain way your whole life. You haven't gotten any negative consequences from it. I think there's a lot of that, right, in the horse industry too. So
there are some advantages of, if you can find, and I'm trying to hide the brand name because I'm not endorsing nor condemning this one I have here. But if you have a horse where you feel like, I want to get a bunch of it into them, or at least some of it, because I don't consider 12 grams to be a bunch, but I want to get it into my horse. And sometimes that people might want to do it is if you're worried about a horse not drinking enough. And that can be cold weather, it could be travel, it could be whatever. This is a handy way to get some into your horse's mouth, and hopefully they will, swallow it, and then as a result, drink water. I would prefer that, if you could just add salt to the grain. And a lot of the grain mixes you get have salt in them. A lot of our commercial feeds, you're going to find it added in there because it's just a normal ingredient. But that would be a good way to do it. But under those circumstances, sure, you can do this. But there is that potential risk that you administer one of these pastes and then the horse still doesn't drink, in which case you may have made the situation worse. And if it's really salty and you're putting it in a big dose all at once, there can be some irritation, anytime you have something really salty, if that horse doesn't drink. So there's an ounce of a risk, but those would be some times where I'd say, I got a sense of humor. But the problem is, how many people actually know what the horse requires? And that's why somebody can scam you and have 0.625 grams of sodium chloride in there, and people don't realize. Go to McDonald's, grab a little packet of salt. Go to the grocery store and buy, you can buy a big container of salt, or go to your feed mill and buy a huge bag of salt. And all of those things would probably cost less than the $7.99 But now let's talk a little bit more regarding, is it really needed, at least for our exercising horses? A number of years ago, maybe 2010, later, somewhere around there, I was giving an invited talk in Madrid, Spain, at, I think it was a conference on equine sports medicine and science. And there was conversations in this meeting regarding electrolytes, and some representatives of the French blah, blah, blah team said that, I don't know the official term, that they do not supplement any electrolytes to their endurance horses. Now, they were speaking in French and there's translations. We did not know if that meant they don't provide any additional electrolytes, or if they don't even actually provide any, meaning even like a salt block in their stalls. So I don't know about that, but at least the French team was saying that for their endurance horses, they don't provide all this extra that we would assume a horse might need. Probably around 2008, plus or minus, we did a research project here with 2-year-olds in simulated endurance training. And these horses were in heavy duty training where every 3 weeks we did a simulated endurance ride of 60 kilometers on a high speed treadmill. So they had to be really fit to do this type of research. And it was a study looking at fiber types and whether that had an influence on hydration. We provided no electrolytes, not even in the haze or the fiber mixes. There was no salt blocks. And this study went on for months. We never saw one issue with those horses. Little surprising that they could go months without any, and obviously sweating a lot, especially on a treadmill. Early this morning, because we had frost outside and I don't like cold. So I did 3 miles on my treadmill down in my basement and I'm just sweating big time. So on a treadmill, you tend to sweat a lot. You probably are also sweating that much outside, but it evaporates right away, so you might not notice it. The point is you're producing a lot of sweat that has electrolytes on it. Horses are not as good as reducing the amount of electrolytes in their sweat. Humans, our sweat glands are better developed, and they learn that, okay, we need to reduce the amount of electrolytes we're losing. Horses, it stays relatively constant. So to go that many months, you're obviously losing lots of electrolytes, and to have no problems, it does beg the question, how critical is it really? Certainly there's some sodium that's captured in the bone that might be released. I'm not encouraging people to do that. Put a salt block in the pasture for them. Keep it out of the rain if you can. Have it in their stall, and you're probably going to be good.
And with those horses, there was no changes in performance, because I think that's normally what people worry about, right? Is like performance of their horses if they aren't providing these electrolytes and salt.
Yes. And so I do want to reemphasize, I'm not suggesting people do that, but that was pretty good evidence that it might not be this huge, oh my gosh, we need to provide it or the horses are going to die on us, especially if the horse is racing 300 yards in Minnesota. You're not losing that much that it requires $60 worth of electrolytes. So things that people believe often are wrong. And I love it when I can provide a message that, folks, it's inexpensive and it's easy.
Absolutely. With horses, that's not always the case. You don't usually have something that's easy or inexpensive or both.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to go back to, because you've worked with racing horses a lot and you already touched on it a little bit, but that use of Lasix or furosemide. So I think that's really interesting because that is often used with racing horses, especially if you have horses that are bleeders. What's the concern there in terms of hydration? Because that is a diuretic.
I am so glad you asked about this. I actually believe the use of furosemide is advantageous to horses' welfare.
Oh, interesting.
How is that for a bizarre response that you were not expecting?
No, that's great. Let's dive into that.
Yeah. So again, I'm a runner. I like to win. You can't see the shelf over here. I have lots of I love destroying my fellow human beings. And I'm not a road class one, so I compete against, mortals. But I am a little competitive and I want to win. And one of the things that I will do, I want to be as light as possible before, particularly I'm talking 5Ks here. So if I have a race, at 6 a.m., I'm up at 4 a.m. to pop some NoDoz. So some caffeine things. I don't go back to sleep, but I want that diuretic effect. I want to be slightly dehydrated going into that race because I will weigh less. and it's easier to run. I'm going to go off camera for 2 seconds. So I love this. This was something I had down in the locker room for probably 20 years. Donald Driver was a player for the Green Bay Packers. I'm a Packers fan, and it's a quote. It says, when you feel like you're about to throw up during a workout, you know you've done something. That's my motto, is like, okay, if I finished a run, a race, and I'm at the end and I have the dry heaves, awesome. Because I left it all out there.
Right.
There's nothing left. I don't think many of my students embrace that same philosophy. And so if you don't have somebody who's really willing to push yourself, because there weren't that many people with side aches or anything. So it was interesting. We actually presented that research last summer in Oslo, Norway. I had an undergraduate student who presented the research at the European Workshop on Equine Nutrition. And what made it fun is oftentimes people use animals as models for humans. They use rats and other things that are really, in my opinion, a horrible model. We did the opposite. We used humans as a model for horses to see, okay, does actually being slightly dehydrated help you? And again, I had the thoughts how the project would turn out. You know, I would love to do it some other time with really good athletes who are really willing to push themselves until they're ready to throw up, because I think we might be able to detect the differences there versus people are like, nah, I'm not going to go any harder than this. But now let's talk about the idea of furosemide being bad, because there are people who believe that. And reasons they believe it is because it increases urine production. They are worried that you are losing minerals. And some of the minerals, even there's talk about, well, you're losing all this calcium. We did research here at Michigan State University. I had a former PhD student, Abby Pritchard, who looked at this over 7 days doing total collections on horses to see whether or not that increase in mineral loss that happens when you're increasing urine production is going to last. No, it was a transitory thing, I think 3 days, and it was kind of back to normal. So unless you're using furosemide every day, it shouldn't be an issue. So from that standpoint, and that was a concern by a lot of folks, like, oh, is it contributing to breakdowns? No. I do think it is really important that after you've used it and the horse is done exercising, give them water. Let them drink up. If you are not doing that, you are really risking putting them into more chronic dehydration. That's a problem. But let's explore this other side of things, because there's people, I've always enjoyed, I go to the International Conference, Equine Exercise Physiology. It's held every 4 years in various spots. 2 years ago, it was in Uppsala, Sweden. Before that, it was down in Australia. Next year, it's going to be in Japan. Fun spots. Life is tough.
I'll have to go to that one. Yeah. It's one of the pros of academia, right? And researching to go to fun places.
Oh, it's wonderful. Well, at that meeting and some of these other international ones, they're kind of like, okay, these stupid, people from the US doing all this research with furosemide, we don't allow that. So why are you even presenting this research? Because a lot of countries don't allow it. And part of the reason they don't is because, we shouldn't be giving those drugs to our horses. And on the surface, that sounds good. However, people in academia sometimes live in a fake world. And what people don't necessarily realize is, what they do in those countries? Well, they pull water from their horses like 12 to 24 hours before a race. So if we want to talk about horse welfare, what's a better situation if you're in a horse? Not getting water for 3 hours before your race and urinating a bunch, and then getting water again right away, or going for 12 to 24 hours without water?
Right. Yeah, it's a really good comparison.
We can't say what is better. I think I know which I would prefer if I was a horse. I'm also the person who gets up at 4 a.m. to start popping no-dos to try and urinate more. Again, little on the competitive side. What can I say?
That's good. Well, that's good too when you have that sort of personal experience with exercise and running, and then you're studying that with your horses. You do have that additional connection that I imagine really, really helps when you're trying to sort of put puzzle pieces together like we do in research.
Well, a lot of my research that I do it because I want answers for me. I'm selfish. And it's not only for my horses, but sometimes for myself. And I do think it's important that you have some understanding. Like, I always think if you're going to ride horses and you expect your horse to be in shape, you should be in shape.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it's unfair to the horse.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
And I'll admit I was not always a runner. I started in 1996 here, was not a runner. And in 1997, there was a fellow faculty member who was putting together the Animal Science Running Club and asked me if I wanted to join. I'm like, no, why would I want to run? Then I thought about it. It's like, I'm the only person on faculty who has the term exercise physiology in their title.
You probably should run.
Should probably run. And it has been so useful. And one of the things that I do with my equine exercise phys class is I give students an opportunity to earn some extra credit points by training for and running in a 5K. Lori Warren, Dr. Lori Warren at University of Florida is the one who, she told me about this idea many years ago. She did with her class. I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. And so we actually had this competition, University of Florida versus Michigan State.
We're going to have to bring that to Guelph too and get in on this competition.
There are a lot of schools that actually have taken up on this because we presented the raw results a number of years ago at the Equine Science Society Symposium. And a lot of folks are like, that's kind of fun.
Yeah, cool.
My goal is not to make runners out of them. Ironically, we have made runners out of a lot of them. There's some people who are like, yeah, running, why would I ever want to do that? Have gone on to do marathons. So that has been a side effect. My main goal is to make the lives of horses better. And I always say the worst day in a horse's life here in Michigan is that first spring day when the sun is shining and the temperature's up there a little bit, and you've not ridden your horse all winter long, and you decide you're going to go out for a 2-hour ride. And then you can't understand why the horse hates you the next day and does not want to be caught. And I say, well, that's like me saying, yeah, I know you've not been in training or done any exercise for the last 6 months. Let's go do a 10K.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good comparison.
And so I encourage them, start out slow. And that when you start this training program, run a quarter of a mile or walk a quarter of a mile. Build up, go very slow, go small distances, and gradually increase. And that empathy for the horse is what it's all about. That don't ask them to do something that you won't do yourself. Obviously, there's different physical abilities, but that idea of being able to extrapolate between horse and human, I think it has merit. And there's some things you can kind of figure out, and you're like, this is what happens to me when I do this. You can't draw complete comparisons. And one of the big things I always caution my students on is the horse can't tell you, and you can't tell the horse using English or whatever language you want. Because as a human, if your coach tells you this is going to suck, but you're going to be a better athlete as a result, you might say, okay, I get it.
True, yeah.
You can't do that to a horse, that this is going to suck, but you're going to be so much better for it, because they don't care about that. They do know that it sucks. So again, lots of things that we can think about that cross over, some things that don't.
84 million times a day, pets eat meals with ingredients from Trow Nutrition. We bring together the science of ingredients, nutrition, and blending to unleash possibilities for pet food brands. Premixes are just the start. Turn to Trow for higher inclusion ingredients too, like proteins and carbohydrates, and highly sensitive ingredients like probiotics. With our palatants and base blends, you can feel confident about what comes in our bags and goes in yours. Learn more at TrowNutritionPets.com.
I love everything that you've brought forward today, and I think it's been so much to think about, and I love all the insight that you've given us. I know I've learned a lot, and I imagine our listeners will too.
I appreciate being invited to it. Again,
absolutely. We'll definitely have to have you back, because I think there's a lot more that we can talk about, or at least I would like to talk to you about.
Oh, we have so many topics that we can just have a ball with. So yeah. Anyway.
To everyone tuning in, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Pet Food Science Podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to subscribe for more conversations on equine and pet nutrition. And again, Dr. Nielsen, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.